This is Randy Wooden, and this is from the Wooden Desk. I hope you'll pull up a chair wherever you may be and take a few moments to give me your ear. And it's my prayer that in a practical, prophetic, and powerful way to impart some things that I have learned over the years that I pray can be a blessing to you or your leadership team. In our last session, we dealt with the 10 areas and gave you 10 areas that as a leader over the years that I really expected out of my team and things that I communicated. I wrote them down. I taught about them. There were other areas, of course, that I shared that I had expectation toward their roles and things such as that, which is also important to have job descriptions and those types of things that bring clarity to what you're expecting from a role of especially a hired person versus a person who is a volunteer. But even with the volunteers, there needs to be a bar or expectation that we talked a little bit about. How high do we raise that bar? And I think it's a discussion that does need to take place in our teams of asking how high do the standards need to be? We do need to have standards. We do need to have excellence. We can't produce excellence without expectations. And everybody would say, amen. So I want to unpack these 10 areas, and I'm going to take 3 of them in this session. I'm going to continue in our next episodes. But this first one that we dealt with is very elementary and very simple, as I said, but yet it is so needed, and that is the area of positiveness. Positiveness. Every one of us have been around somebody who sees the cup half empty and is always, the sky's falling. I mean, it's just, it is always a negative mindset. So, when I think about this, I think it was Louis Timberlake, who is an author, who said that the top 2 reasons people fail is that they anticipate failure and they are fearful. Ultimately, both of those equal what is called a negative mindset. We all need to have a positive mindset, but yet I realize not everybody's like that. I heard a story about a traveling salesman who had broken down out in the middle of a rural farm area, and he had basically had a flat tire, went around to the trunk and realized he did not have a jack to get the tire up to replace it. He's aggravated, he's frustrated, sees in the distance a house and thinks, well, maybe they'll have a jack I can borrow. So he makes his way toward the house, but while he's making his way there, he's got this mind game going, saying, well, they'll probably not even answer the door for a stranger, or, and he's got all this stuff going on. He said, if they have a jack, they probably won't even let me use the jack. And he's got all this negative thing going on until finally he knocks on the door and somebody comes to the door and he looks at the person and says, keep your jack, turns around and heads back for the car. I think sometimes a negative mindset sets us up without a doubt for failure. Not only that, but it toxifies the atmosphere of any leadership in any leadership room. It's kind of like having the proverbial pink elephant in the room, but nobody's talking about it. What's wrong with that person? And what I realize is that one of the worst things we can have is a negative mindset, negative talk going on at the same time. See, I believe positiveness is key within the leadership core of any one of within the leadership scope and team that we may have. That's a question we need to ask. Do we have a positive team? Do we have positive people? If you don't, I think it's essential you have that face-to-face meeting. Somebody said, well, what will they say? Well, all they can say is, I need to change. Or you need a change, because you being on the team is ultimately a detriment to the rest of the team. And that's why sometimes leaders are afraid of those conflicts. But what happens is they're perpetuating the problem by not dealing with it. Wow. Somebody says, yeah, I know. Let's go on. Let's go on now. But let me talk about 10 marks of a positive person. I believe, first of all, they are enthusiastic. There's an excitement. Number 2, they are self-confident. They're usually confident people who are positive people. Number 3, they're creative. 4, they're persistent, usually positive through adversity or problems. They're usually solution conscious, meaning they're open to looking for opportunities instead of obstacles. I've always said there's people who are the master of the obvious. There's a negative, they see the negative. But it's not enough to see the negative. It's the ability to have a solution and be positive about it. Not only that, but number 6, they're usually likable. I mean, I like to be around positive people. Nothing worse than being around somebody who drains the living daylights out of you. And yet their smile, they're nice. These are the kind of people that you want to have in your life and in your leadership team. Not only that, but they're action oriented. They do something. Not only that, but they take initiative, number 8. Number 9, they are generous. Usually they're givers. I'm not going to pay people to be negative. I want to have people who are generous and be positive. And then ultimately, number 10, they are success oriented. They want to succeed and they want others around them to succeed. See, when you talk about negative people, we all have to be aware of negative influence that we have within our leadership, because that perpetuates itself. And unfortunately, those are areas that we have to be very guarded against. And one of the things that I continually did is to build up and to be positive as a leader, because people get enough negative in their life. And so I think this is important. So I might ask the question, who's speaking into your life? And I think this is very important for all of us to ask that question. Number 2 is this area of servanthood. I love the quote that D.L. Moody always made. He said, "The measure of a man is not how many servants he has, but how many men he serves." Wow, that's awesome. See, a servant is someone who sees a need and yet takes responsibility to meet the need. I think this is so important for all of us to realize. This comes many a times in the form of what we had in a ministry that we served in for the last 25 plus years, was armor bearers, individuals who undergirded leadership. They prayed for you, they served you, and their responsibility was to just want to lighten your load. See, the difficulty so much in organizations today is we want to be superstars. We're looking for a superstar. And God is not looking for superstars. He's just looking for, servants who will do supernatural things. And I really believe that somehow, some way, we have all got to ask the question is, do we have servants, or do we have people who are rather all about being selfish instead of servants? They're self-centered rather than servant-centered. Wow. The servant asks these questions. He asks, number 1, what load can I carry at this time? A servant asks, how can I lift your load? How can I help you? They listen. In what ways? Number 3, can I demonstrate helpfulness to you? These are questions a servant asks. Not only that, but he asks, number 4, is the leader doing anything that I can do? It's never beneath them. One of the things I do wrestle with from time to time is leaders who become a little bit arrogant, or that they are too good to do something. They're too good to pick up some chairs or pick up some tables and move them, or to do some things that others may be doing, whether it's in the setup or the cleanup. Many a times we had different ministries that done different things, and or even doing maintenance. And at times I would join in and do some of those things. Why did I do that? First of all, I done that to demonstrate servanthood. That was my main reason. Second of all, it's because I'm not lazy and I like to work to start with. But ultimately, I was wanting to reproduce something in the organization that I was a part of. And as a result, I really do believe we had a lot of servants. We had a lot of people who wanted to serve because they saw the leaders who were willing to serve. And yet servants ask those questions. How can I do? How can I help? What can I take in the portfolio that you're doing that I can lighten your load? See, what I realize in servanthood is not hard to define. It's only hard to achieve. We live in a different day. It seems like within many organizations, and especially even in the church world today, the church is more about what am I getting out of it? It's about me. I want it my way. Jesus was very clear. He who is going to sit in the chief seats is the one who serves. He says, you who humble yourself, you will be exalted. And he rebuked those religious people for just that, their arrogance and their religiosity. He literally despised that. I'm thinking, oh my. Expectation. I have an expectation that if you're here, you want to serve. I many a times in membership classes would tell the new members that are coming in, you're not joining a country club. You give up your rights. Not necessarily that you don't have the right to vote. You have a right to vote, but I'm saying in the essence that you are giving up your life to serve others. And I'm here to serve you. Wow, that's novel, isn't it? But it's still the kingdom. It's still what he says we should do. And yet in the leadership scope, it was something that I tried to communicate and demonstrate. Number 3 is growth potential. An expectation is that every leader that is around me is going to work to grow their own lives and to continue a lifelong pursuit of development. That was always dear to my heart because I realized starting out I didn't have the skill sets nor the books or the resources that are today so readily at your fingertips. But there's no reason. It doesn't matter what you're doing, that there's somebody who's doing it with excellence that you can learn from and you can grow from. I would say this, that no tree is ever full grown. If a tree is still living, it is still growing. And when a tree stops growing, it's dead. I don't want to be a dead tree. Investing in ourselves is a continual pathway towards emotional growth, leadership growth, intelligent growth. I have to realize continually that I am having to relearn and learn new things. I'm in a season right now. I've gone back to school and I've taken training to become a church consultant, certified, and those types of things. And, though I have a lot of experience with church work, I'm having to relearn some things. The way we do church, the methodology, and even the processes have changed in so many ways in order to produce ministry that is not only going to be healthy, but it's going to be effective. So many times that is seen in some of the skill sets that I'm giving, that as simple as it may sound, is that if people quit growing, the organization quits growing. See, I always say that there's 2 key areas that we have to grow in, essentially have to grow for our leadership and a core of our leadership to grow. And one of them is our competence and strong leadership. Competence is the knowing of leadership, but then the character of leadership. I don't know if you can learn character, but you can know what character is so that you're living a life of character that is committed in leadership. This is what I know about leadership and what I know about the areas of relationships that I am in and I have expectation to. That first of all, they must both grow. Relationships that I am in, the people that are around me, that are closest to me, that are my team, my staff, whatever they may be, that they are growing together and we are growing up. Not only that, but they're growing together. I just said that, but that was the second point. They are growing together. There is a unifying of that growth. I always used early on the 4 C's about growth. First of all, communication. Where are the areas that we need to grow in? I don't know about you, but you need to be able to communicate with the people around you where they need to grow so you can help them, develop them. But likewise, in your life, if you're an executive, you need to be finding people that are higher than you are so that you're growing in those areas. And then the second C is change. What areas must be facilitated to be changed in my life and to grow in my organization? The sad fact is there are people that I know that, I've had past relationship with who have chosen not to go on the growth track. They stay where they're at in their emotions, their competence. And it's not to say they're bad people. It's just they chose not to. Remember, my wife once made a statement to me. She said, Randy, not everybody's going to go with you. Not everybody wants to go on the train you're on. And a lot of times, yes, sometimes God does call people out in different areas. I get that. But there's a lot of times there are people that's not willing to grow where you're willing to go. And you have to be willing to understand that. That's hard. That brings me to the 3rd C, and that's cost. What price will it pay for your growth? I think it was John Maxwell or somebody else who made it say you had to give up to go up. But there's a sense that it does cost you your time. It costs the element. For me to go back to school, it's costing me some money. It's costing my time and my effort. But I know that it's going to pay dividends because I have expectation that it's going to be so. But yet the area that it's going to cost me, and then the challenge, C, the last C is challenge. Am I able and willing to grow in the areas I need to grow? You know, I realize sometimes we have to have this expectation, and sometimes that expectation is not always welcome in other churches. I remember I've had the opportunity to pastor 4 churches. The last church I pastored almost 26 years. But the second church I pastored, I had left and gone to the next church. I had pastored for 3 years. And a few months after that, one of the ladies who was a leader in that church and dear friend had called. We have friends in all the churches that we've pastored, had called and said, Pastor, how you doing? And we had, the small talk and how's things going. And she said, we really miss you. And I said, well, that's good. We miss you all. And then she went on to say, but since you've left, and all of a sudden she said something that kind of hit me in the stomach. She says, the pressure's off. And I remember asking, what do you mean the pressure's off? And she said, well, a lot of the people said, you were a good pastor, but there was a lot of pressure having you because you had expectations and you were pushing everybody to do the work and to produce, growth in the church. And I thought, and I didn't say anything. And I hung up and I thought about it and I thought, well, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But at the essence, I realized it's not always welcomed and nor is it always received. I think it's important for us to realize that we're always going to be challenged. And one of the challenges we're going to have is not everybody wants to grow. And if I have team members who don't want to grow, then I have to be willing either to accept that and let them be, or to challenge them to grow, or to be willing to do the hard thing of making a change in that area or in that role. Because if I'm wanting the organization to grow, sometimes the hardest part of it is to realize there's people I like. Over the years, I always struggle with having to let somebody go. But over the years, I've probably had to let 8 or 10 people go who had been staff or because they weren't producing. And I remember calling one gentleman, and he was the greatest guy. I mean, far as personality and outgoing, and I loved him dearly, but he was not producing. We'd already had conversation after conversation, and he was not a fit. And it wasn't that he wasn't a good person, but I remembered having to call him in that day and say, hey man, I love you. You're an outstanding person. But I said, you're not fitting and producing what needs to happen in the position you're in. And he agreed with me. And he left the ministry. It was a hard leave. I cared about the couple very much. I wish I had just stayed in the ministry. But yet I realized so many times that decision had to be made because I needed the area that was going on. I had to say, I love the ministry and the growth of the body more than I do just caring about one person that may be a good person, but they're not a fit in that area of ministry. Those times are real hard because sometimes that comes back to the thing that there is a price to growth. And as leaders, there are hard choices you have to make. And one of the hard choices you will make is confronting this area of complacency, this area that is a status quo and mediocrity. And I think we want to rise beyond mediocrity. I think Chuck Swindoll, one of his books, I wrote this quote and put it in my stuff for leadership. He said, organizations tend to lose vitality rather than gain it as time passes. He says they also tend to give greater attention to what they were rather than what they are becoming. It is easy to look back at the past and smile at yesterday's accomplishments than it is to look ahead into the future and think of tomorrow's possibilities. Wow. I wonder if that is us sometimes. When we are growing, we're looking into the future. When we stop growing, we look into the past. Wow. Being in relationship, I can grow from being around other people, but I hope they can grow from being around me. Sad fact is, there will be people you will outgrow. And yes, your relationships will change. I've had that with colleagues because I had taken a desire just to continue to go up. And I refuse to stay in a relationship that was going to only talk about yesterday and complain about the situation without any solution to change. I believe God wants more for us all. I had to come to the realization that there are some people who are not going to go on the journey that you're on. I don't know who I'm speaking to, but I really feel this very strongly. That is even within your leadership team. And that was the thing that was always difficult is if you're somewhere long term, it evolves. And you pray it's evolving for the good and positive things are happening, but it evolves in that is because excellence has been set and you have set bars of expectation, raising the bar. Some people are not going to decide they want to go with you and go higher with you. So with that said, I encourage you to keep growing and to stay on this. So we've talked about this thing of being positive. We've talked about this thing of being a servant. We've talked about this thing of growth potential. I believe you have growth potential and God has great things for you. Stay tuned to our next session as we continue these 10 areas of expectations from a pastor's heart. I pray God increase the kingdom of God in you and around you. Take a moment, discuss this with your team. Ask the questions that need to be asked. God bless you and have a great day.